In our last video, we looked at, the last couple videos, we looked at the idea of how man came here, the land bridge theory. Then we looked at the specific Native Americans and just a brief outline of what North Carolina was like and who the Native Americans were there and where they lived. And then we talked about, just at the very end, I alluded to the whole idea of how their lives have changed once the Europeans came. And that is our bridge to really looking at what Europeans came, and from what countries did they represent, and exactly what did they begin to do. In the very last video, we were talking about those 5 reasons why Europeans began to explore, and it was for salt and spices and pepper and those things. It was gold and riches and knowledge, evangelism, spreading Christianity, and for power. So to conquer new lands. And so now, once that was the reason they began to move out, those are these same reasons why they began to come to what we know today as North and South America. So those reasons are very significant and pivotal as to not just initially why they came out, but now we're going to look at the different explorers that they sent to reach those 5 goals, or to accomplish those 5 goals. This is far from extensive in terms of all the explorers there were, but these are the ones we're going to just skim through, and some very important ideas about the Columbian Exchange. Again, just to reiterate this, Portugal and Prince Henry, who was very interested in navigation and exploration, he developed a school, and Portugal was on the forefront of exploration. And so Vasco da Gama, sailing for Portugal, was the first one to ever sail around the Horn of Africa and make it to India and the Indies. So all of a sudden, instead of dealing with the land route, they realized it is safe. You can do this. This is possible. And this is a new way to get spices. Well, then all the rest of the European countries were getting into this. How do we get out and, Portugal's ahead of us, and how do we catch up with them? So in 1492, Columbus is sailing for Portugal's neighbor, Spain. And he lands up in today what we call the Bahamas in the South Caribbean Sea, or Caribbean Sea, however you want to say it. He was really the first European, he was not the first European to enter into North America. What made Columbus so different than the Vikings about 1,000 years before was that it became well known. The news spread, and other countries thought, oh my gosh, there's this whole new land. He's reached the Indies. They thought they reached the Indies. Columbus said, why should we go around Africa when we could just go across the water? And so now other countries are like, oh, we can't let Spain get ahead of us. They found a different route. Portugal went around Africa. Spain hit it by going west. So we got to catch up. And England was part of the competition, and they sent John Cabot. Now John Cabot, when he came across, Columbus was way down here in the Bahamas. John Cabot was exploring what today we know as Canada and Newfoundland. And so he was looking for a passage through this called the Northwest Passage to get to the Indies. So Cabot, he went for England. Amerigo Vespucci explored South America coast, and he also explored it for Spain. And he was more of a cartographer, which is a map maker, and he definitely traveled and made maps, and it is from his first name that we get North America and South America because of his map making skills. And then we have Verrazano, and France is now getting involved in it. Now, Verrazano is not a French name. So understand that these countries were more than willing to hire and pull people with other nationalities, not necessarily a citizen of that country, to do the explorating for them. And so Verrazano, he explored the North Carolina coast. He came all the way down here to, and then he went up, and on his trips he saw New York, and up here by Nova Scotia, Massachusetts. So he was exploring all that coastline for England. And here is a picture of the bridge in New York that is named after him, the Verrazano Bridge. Now, Spain. Remember that American Vespucci and Columbus sailed for Spain. And Spain immediately wanted to get a jump on getting the spices, getting the gold, the riches, whatever they could. Remember, out of those 5 things, they really wanted the riches, the gold, the jewels, and the power. And so Spain sent really soldiers over. Not as many explorers, not as many people to want to colonize as they did soldiers to conquer the Native Americans there. And so Spain will send what we call conquistadors, and that means to conquer. And these soldiers, explorers, and adventurers went searching through this whole new discovered land for God to evangelize, for gold, for the riches, the gold, the jewels, and for the glory or the power of their country. And this was their common phraseology or their common banner for why they did what they did, for God, gold, and glory. Then you have Cortez. He was, and this is, about 20 years after Columbus, not quite. And, these countries are sending a lot more. And understand that when they came here and explored it, they didn't just say, oh, there's new land, let's go home and tell them about it. They actually would make a legal claim that whatever they explored, whatever land they saw, is theirs. And so it wasn't an issue of the Native Americans that they should have the land or shouldn't have the land. They were making, in their minds, a legal claim that in the name of the king or the queen who they were sailing for, that the land they see is now theirs. Well, if this land, let's say, in modern-day Mexico, is now Spain's land, then who are those Native Americans living on it? And do they have a right to live on our land now? So, the idea was, no, this is our land. This is now land owned by Spain, and we will now take over. And so the Native Americans are like, I don't think so. We've been here for thousands of years. But they had the technology. And they also had a form of warfare that we will talk about a little later. And it has to do with biology. We had diseases that the Native Americans were never exposed to. And so once they came and they brought these diseases with them, the Native Americans who had no immunities to them died off by the thousands. So we have Cortez, and he begins his conquest of the Aztec people group in Mexico. European competition. These countries were all in competition against how much land, how much riches, what resources we can get from each other. And by this time, Spain and England are both Christian countries, but Spain is a Catholic country and England is a Protestant country. They're both a Christian religion, but 2 types of Christianity. So that even made their competition greater. So how they established a foothold in the New World had huge effects. So they competed against each other. They wanted to establish colonies. They wanted to set a foothold. They wanted to say, this is ours. How they did that and the process of doing that had huge effects. And the meeting of people from the Old World to the Native Americans in the New World produced an exchange. We came, the Europeans, when I say we, I meant people of European descent came, and they brought technologies and food and clothes and medicines and all sorts of things that the Native Americans had never seen. Likewise, once the Europeans got here, they saw foods, types of farming, types of medicine, numbers, some technologies that were adapted to the environment in North and South America that they had never seen before. And so they would learn from the Native Americans, and the Native Americans learned from the Europeans. And this is called the Columbian Exchange. It is an exchange of ideas and products between the Old and New Worlds. So, what would some of these ideas or products include? And why would they be named after Christopher Columbus? So what do you think? As you're taking your notes, I want you to pause and just address these two questions. Now you've addressed those two questions and we're moving on. First of all, let's get a clear picture on what we mean by the Old and the New World. Here are the Old World. This is the Old World. It's established. It was known. There was trading between all these cultures. All this was known. This is the New World, North and South America, and this was not known to them, nor did the peoples of North and South America know or aware of the people in these other continents. So there's your New World, and there's your Old World. Which products went from the New World to the Old World during this exchange? Well, from the New World, things like pumpkins. Europeans had never seen pumpkins. They've never seen turkeys, peanuts. The potato, which soon became a staple food for the Irish, never was seen, never known. For thousands of years, Europeans had never known that. Same thing with corn and tobacco. Now, what was from the Old World to the New? Things like many of the diseases I already mentioned, livestock. Horses were not a part of North and South America until we brought them. And when I say we, I mean the Europeans. Grains, wheat, sugar. Sugar is a huge business now in the tropics and in South America. Sugar was never known here. Coffee, horses, and this kind of faith, Christianity. Here's a picture of smallpox. A woman, a Native American woman, suffering from smallpox. And this is an example of a type of disease that was brought. The Columbian Exchange led to, this is an acronym, CROPS. And what does CROPS mean? C are cash crops grown in America that caused the Europeans who now claim this land to need workers. So these Europeans came over there and they start growing these crops like sugar cane and corn, and they come over to supervise. Well, the disease killed many Native Americans, so where are their workers? Where are they going to get these people to grow these crops so they can become rich? So that's your C. Then you have R. This is the solution for the Europeans. Racial slavery. The Europeans began to enslave the Native Americans that survived, that didn't succumb to these diseases, and then began to import Africans. They would capture them. And remember that in Africa, the slave trade had been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. So when the Europeans began to explore in Africa or have contact through trade with Africa, there was a trade slave already developed, already established, and they just joined in with that. So the way to do that is bring in slaves. Your O is cash crops, cotton, tobacco, coffee, sugar, and other specialty items. These were the money makers. The money you could get from these, which really encouraged the import and the enslavement of people. And then P was the plantation system. The idea of these very rich people from these exploring countries would come. They would be friends of the king or the queen, and they had connections. They would be given huge plots of land, create a plantation. They would run the main operating, but they would hire people to work under them to produce what they needed. And then the very last one is crops. This brought slavery to America. I just mentioned a moment ago that slavery was already very evident within the Middle East and Africa, and all that, from, the Roman Empire on out. Slavery, slavery, slavery. And now, because in this Columbian exchange, slavery is now introduced into the Americas. There are some long-term and immediate causes, okay? And long-term and immediate effects. It is very important that you pause and really know what these are. Immediate causes: Europeans arrive, they bring new plants, animals, and diseases. That immediately happens. What's an immediate effect? Is whole cultures are wiped out. The Aztecs and the Incas lose their whole kingdoms, you would say. Native Americans die by the people group. They're hundreds and thousands. Enslaved Africans are brought into the Americas to take the place of the Native Americans that died so they could work. And now foods are being introduced. Okay? What are some of the long-term causes for this Columbian exchange, for this to continue? Obviously, God, gold, and country. We need to introduce the Native Americans to proper faith. And we wanted to make gold, we wanted to become rich, and we wanted our country to have the status and the glory. What were long-term effects? The spread of products all over the world. All of a sudden, people who have never experienced some types of foods or other things now had those. Populations, because of the introduction to these new foods and the ability for people in Europe to come to the Americas, now that these European countries own this land, they can come and they can start developing their own homes and get land for the first time that they couldn't get in Europe, and the population begins to grow. You have a lot of different beliefs and different ideas being infused. You have different races intermarrying. And then you have, like I said, lots of people from Europe seeing the Americas as a land of opportunity, a place where I can't own land in Europe, but I can own it here in the Americas. So, here's our quick review. Europe looks outward. One of the things that really produced that was the competition between the nations, mining gold and glory. Columbus first discovers, other European countries compete with Spain in their exploration. There are results into this, and we call it the Columbian Exchange. It is the exchange of ideas and goods. And the result of the exchange was positive for the Europeans, and it should say devastating for the Native Americans. Sorry about that. And crops. What does that mean? All right? So, bring these notes to class tomorrow and expect a quiz.